In fact, some people are talking about systemic competition between democracies and illiberal regimes or authoritarian regimes that I would take, I would name probably mostly dictatorship or criminal regimes. I don't think there is a kind of competition, as many people say, but I think it's a fight to the death. It's a fight to the death. Because basically the dictatorships, namely Russia and People's Republic of China and some others, but they are major power, they are great powers, major powers, member of the permanent members of the UN Security Council. Those countries have a fight to death against liberal democracy. They want the EU to vanish, to be dismantled. They want the response in terms of international law, in terms of humanitarian law, just to be completely impossible. And for that, they are just trying to favor the regimes who are committed the more crimes. Just take an example. For me, it's the most speaking example, which is the example of Syria. In Syria, Assad regime has killed around 1 million people. That's the worst tragedy of the 21st century. This regime was completely emboldened by Putin's Russia and now by China. And Russia itself has committed more crimes, more war crimes. I mean, they killed more Syrian civilians than even ISIS did. And I think that's very meaningful. Many people didn't pay attention to that. But I think the very idea is just to say, from, I mean, Russian or Chinese point of view, your values, you democracies of the West, the US, Canada, the EU, they have absolutely no meaning for us. And we will show you that you are not consistent in defending and promoting those values. First of all, I think there are two things when it comes to the liberal answers that we have to bring to the regimes. First of all, we have to be proud of our liberal values. We in Europe, we in the US, in Canada, in some also Asian democracy like Japan, let's say, and some others. We have to promote those values, but we have to be consistent in promoting them. It's not only to say we have the best values of the world, but those values are meaningful. We have certainly also to achieve more very concrete results, especially for the poor, for the people who are left behind, for the people who are not able to cope with, I mean, economic competition. But those values are very important. Then there is another dimension, not only domestic dimension of liberal values, but international dimension of liberal values, which is basically the rule of law, which is humanitarian law, which is international laws. And for instance, there must be a fight against people who are committing imprescriptible crimes, for instance. That I think very meaningful. So we have to promote this idea, because if the world order, as we put it, is not liberal, then I think it will be destroyed. When we are talking about universal values, for instance, I mean, liberal values and universal values, in my mind, are exactly the same things. Some people are saying, and especially the authoritarian and criminal regimes, dictatorships, they think that the Western values or liberal values as Western values. No, they are not Western values. If you see people taking to the streets, let's say in Moscow, or in Minsk, or in Hong Kong, or you know, in Algiers, or you know, in Aleppo or in Damascus, etc. Those people, they have no clue idea of the I mean, the liberal houses like, let's say, Tocqueville, Locke, Montesquieu, you know, and the Federalists and others. But in the very heart of a heart, they know that the liberal values are the essential values for them. So there is nothing like Asian values separated from Western values. Those values are really universals, and they are liberal. I think the future of liberal ideas and the liberal democracy will basically depend on the consistency of our leaders in Europe, in the US, in Canada, and some other countries. Everything, the future is basically in their hands. For nowadays, the real problem is that we have liberal leaders emboldening dictatorships. For instance, when they are not calling a spade, when they are not shaming and blaming, let's say, Russia or People's Republic of China for what they are doing in Syria, in Ukraine, in Hong Kong, in Xinjiang, with the genocide against Uyghur people, etc. And I think that's the real problem that I have. I remember a discussion with a very old Serbian man who was a historical opponent to Milosevic at that time. And at that time he told me, well, you Europeans, you've lost historical consciousness. And for me, I already remember, it was 15 years ago. And I remember the discussions that we had in Belgrade, in a small cafe, about, his anxiety about the future. And I think the problem that we have in Europe is mostly a question of leadership. For instance, you have very many people, in Europe, including in Germany and in France, who are very sensitive to foreign money, let's say. That's a question of corruption. That's a question of what we call Schröderization, of Western leaders. So basically, I am confident on the values themselves. Sometimes, I must say, that I have some doubts about the leaders.